Well, welcome back to the Azure Podcast. This is episode number 515, being recorded on the 26th of March, 2025, with special guest Matteo Pagani. I'm Sujit, and on Teams with me, we have Cale, Russell, Cynthia, and of course, our special guest Matteo, who we're going to get to in just a minute. But before that, let's cover a few updates that were announced in the past couple of weeks in the Azure space. I see Eben put a couple that he's not here today, but we can try and cover them over here. And Russell, I see you put one. Did you want to start with that one?
Yeah, I was looking for interesting ones, and this one just popped up. Something I've been doing quite a lot of recently with Azure Container Apps. But this is the enablement of general availability for serverless GPUs within Azure Container Apps. So pretty handy for people that want to spin up workloads to do some modeling or some data analytics type work. So great for running AI workloads on demand. I think they spin up pretty quickly, and yeah, it's part of a feature set that's come into Azure Container Apps, along with dynamic instances that can be spun up really quickly as a sandbox as well. But having GPUs available in there now is GA, so I expect that to be quite popular.
Yeah, and especially, we've been using Azure Container Apps jobs. So the jobs feature in Azure Container Apps specifically to run some of these machine learning workloads in Azure. And that's really nice because the job just runs for you kick it off, it runs, and it finishes, right? It only runs for the few minutes or seconds that your program's actually running. So technically only using the GPU for that period of time. So you just pay for those few minutes, and that's very cost effective. I did see another update in Azure Container Apps, and I'm glad that it's becoming more popular. It's now generally available in Australia, Southeast, France, South, Japan, West, and Spain Central. So the availability of that of ACA is certainly growing across the globe.
It's such a good service, I must admit. I mean, when AKS first came out, and I was still on the fence as to whether containers were, you know, it was a step back from what we were used to with Azure PaaS, Azure, app service and so on. But I'm totally sold on Azure Container Apps. It's just so easy to get up and running. It's cheap. It just works. It's brilliant.
Yeah, and you don't want to mess around with AKS. But in some cases, though, a lot of companies still want the AKS control for security reasons. And I'd like to talk about a few AKS updates that were also announced this week. So Windows support for virtual machine node pools in AKS is now in public preview. So that's something it would be available if customers need Windows VMs, I guess, in AKS. And then Azure Linux 3.0. So Azure has created their own variety of Linux as a host operating system. And now that's version 3.0. It's available in AKS. It's a version of Linux that is specifically created for running container workloads. So they really tuned Linux specifically for that use case, as opposed to, using Ubuntu or something that's off the shelf for a number of different use cases. This one's tuned just for container workloads, and that option is available in AKS now. How many of you remember MOTD? Do you know what that stands for? MOTD. Message of the day. You remember in early Linux days when you sign on or you sign on to a system and there'd be a new message. It's called the message of the day. I remember that. And believe it or not, there are some compliance standards that require a message of the day provided to users that log onto the system. It could be something that they should be worried about, like some kind of general concern about the security of the system that they want the users to know about, but it has to be there. And AKS now has a feature that they've added where you can set the message of the day in AKS. So if somebody logs onto the nodes, they'll see the message of the day, and that could be something that they have to be careful about. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Also in AKS land, there is the control plane. The control plane that we use for AKS is now surfaces metrics, and those metrics can be looked at in Azure. So if you're worried about, how's my control plane doing in AKS, at the endpoint, you can keep an eye on that. What else we got here? I thought I saw one more over here. I think good. I think that's a good roundup with all the updates. So we're mostly in the AKS space, like I said. So I think we could. Does anybody else have anything else they want to touch on? I think Cynthia, is
I
there?
do have I do have
Yeah.
one more about Copilot Studio. So there is one feature that I currently got into preview yesterday that is deep reasoning, and agent flows will go into GA on March 31st. So what they are is, if you think about deep reasoning now, given if you are a M365 customer as well, all of your other information is there ready. So with these deep reasoning agents, the example that we include in the link will be going after a request for a proposal. So if you can already feed in all your interaction with the specific customers, some of your other functionality, it can give you very quickly a first draft of what that RFP would look like. And then the other flow that it showed was around the agent flows, and agent flows really reminded me of Power Automate, but it is a AI powered Power Automate now. That instead, if you were a Power Automate user before, you know that a lot of the conditions you have to write in of, if this happens, do this, if this happens, do this other thing. But now you can use AI to determine what are some of the intents, or what are some of the reason why this customer had this feedback, and then also have AI create a specific response. If someone was unsatisfied with your product, then maybe as a product team, you want to reach out to them and understand why. So I think this is really cool in terms of how similar it is, but also how much smarter and how much easier it has become.
Since you've broken our founding principle of discussing just stuff that's Azure, and you've gone into the land of copilots and possibly modern work or biz apps, you just reminded me of something that I think people should be aware of and try. If you're a developer, there's an agentic copilot version in the insiders version of VS Code, and it's under Copilot Edit, so you can switch it on if you've got the insiders version of VS Code. And yeah, this whole agentic switch on how these co-pilots can work and help you is quite another game changer. I mean, Gen AI is just keeps introducing all these advances, but the agentic part of it means that you can basically you can ask it to put together a plan to make some changes that are quite wide reaching across your application. In fact, there's a YouTube video where somebody goes off and creates a full mobile app using it. But it will go off, it will create a plan, it will start writing the code or making changes to your existing code. It will then go and build your code for you, and it will then look for the errors that it's got or warnings. It will then fix those. It will then rebuild them, test it, and fire it up for you. So it's taking it all a step further. And pretty much development in that mode is more about how good am I at instructing the AI and validating what it's done, as opposed to how good a programmer am I. And I think that's a skill that every developer is going to have to learn, because I tell you, you can set this thing off and you can go and get yourself a cup of tea, come back and review what it's done and where it's got to, and it's just incredible. It's really powerful, and yeah, like I say, it's a game changer. Sorry, it's not Azure, but I know all this stuff runs on Azure on the back end, so kind of a bit
Well,
of a
and I think it's all related to our special guest today, Matteo. He has a lot to talk about in terms of copilots. He has been a lot of work on it. So, Matteo, good kind of segue. Please introduce yourself to our listeners. Tell us what you do, and we'll take it from there.
Yeah, hello everyone. Thank you for having me. And yes, I'm going to break again the rule of speaking only about Azure, because I come from the modern work world. So I'm part of the tech strategy team in the global customer success. And I'm in the modern work area. So specifically, I'm in a small team called AI and ecosystem. And our work is to pilot the latest technologies in the modern work and AI space, and then use our learnings to scale this across customers and the field. And as of today, one of our main area of focus is Copilot and agents within Copilot. So I work a lot with Copilot Studio, with declarative agents, custom engine agents. So a lot of the stuff around the agentic world in the Microsoft 365 ecosystem.
So, that's really good, Matteo, because, honestly, we're all hearing a lot about this agentic thing flowing through, and it's never clear to me, at least, when we should start thinking about, using something like an agent flow in our applications. Cynthia just gave a couple of use cases which were good, but if we're working with a customer on some project, right? When should we start thinking about it? Is this the very first thing we talk to a customer about? Like, oh, let's do agents, for right away, or do we let's look at the flow, let's see where we can plug in. I guess I'm just trying to understand, how aggressive should we be in adopting this technology here?
The way we typically position this to customer, especially when we are talking about M365 Copilot, because we have the same challenge, because we have a base product, which is M365 Copilot, and then we have the concept of agents running in M365 Copilot. The way we typically talk about this is thinking about the mobile ecosystem paradigm. So in the mobile ecosystem, you have your phone, which you use it to do basic tasks like calling, sending messages. But when you want to do something which is more specific, you rely on an app. So you want to listen to music, you open an app. You want to call Uber, you open an app. In the Copilot ecosystem, it's similar. So when you need when you have a generic need, like you have a question and you know that the answer is somewhere in your organizational data, then you rely on the standard Copilot experience. But when you want to use the Copilot experience to solve a specific scenario, a specific business need, then it's where an agent comes in, because compared to the basic experience, you can specialize an agent, you can restrict the knowledge of an agent. So in the context of Copilot, M365 Copilot, you can say, don't use all the organizational data, but use only this set of data. So you can restrict it. You can empower it with actions, so enabling the agent to perform tasks on other platforms, to interact with other platforms, up until the most complex scenarios, which you have, for example, in the Azure world, where you can have complex multi-agent architecture, where you have a scenario, and the scenario is fulfilled by different agents with different tasks, different skills, working together to reach that goal.
I'm curious, when you mentioned that multi-agent scenario, or even just with one agent, how do you advise our customers to test out the flow if they're going after actions, and then a lot of times the responses may not be deterministic?
That's a really, really good question. A couple of approaches are first, relying on evaluation tools. So, for example, in Azure AI Foundry, you have services to do evaluation, and every agent is made by basically prompts and tools. So you are able to test them even without putting all together into a conversation, because you can anticipate the type of outputs, so you can create, for example, test data on the type of inputs and outputs you can expect, so you can use that to validate it. And then if you need more control, there are some tools you can leverage. For example, when it comes to the pro code world, semantic kernel as an approach called process framework that you can use to create more guided agents experiences. Or, for example, as you just mentioned, in the low code world, agent flows in Copilot Studio, where you can have an agentic ecosystem, but with a little bit more of guidance on the direction they need to take based on the response. So these are a couple of options. You will always need to manage the unpredictability of LLMs. There's no way out on that. But with these approaches, you can at least try to mitigate these scenarios.
Hey, Matteo. Yeah, my question kind of goes along with that. You've been mentioning a lot of terms here around like Copilot Studio and Pro Code, Low Code, and all these different things. Like, how do people consume that, right? Because as is usual, I think at Microsoft, like we have a bunch of different ways you can do stuff depending on your needs. And I guess I'm looking for some guidance there. Is there like best practices around people like, hey, no, always kind of like start off in Studio if you can, because it will do 80% of what you need. And then if you need to do it over here's this other piece, like how do you see that playing out right now, like with all these surfaces, you know?
So typically in the Microsoft 365 ecosystem, we envision three different audiences based on the tool. So we have a no-code audience, and the tool for that is Agent Builder, which is the experience integrated into the M365 Copilot chat. So you open the chat and you have a button, Create Agent, which gives you a very simple UI to create a basic agent. It's an approach that we call it no code because it's really a simple UI. You can even describe the agent in natural language. And it's really meant more for personal or small team usage because the options to share the agents are limited. For example, you are not able to add actions, only knowledge. So very simple scenarios. Then, if you want to go bigger and you want to do more stuff, you can use the low-code approach with Copilot Studio, which is for an audience that we call makers. So people that they are not coders, so they don't have a software engineering background, but they have a good knowledge of technology, of the business processes of the organization. And with Copilot Studio, you get like a mix of both worlds. So it's not super intuitive like Agent Builder, but it's still heavily UI based. You have a simpler language like PowerFX to create formulas. And this is tailored for broader scenarios because with Copilot Studio, for example, you have better options to manage and distribute agents. You can publish an agent for the entire organization. As an IT administrator, you have more controls over what people can do with agents. You can add actions for example, one of the advantages of Copilot Studio is that Copilot Studio is part of the Power Platform, and when you create an agent, you can leverage the entire catalog of the Power Platform connectors as actions. So in Power Platform, we have a lot of pre-made connectors to call Outlook, to call Excel, to call SharePoint, to call Salesforce, SAP, Jira, and you can turn these connectors into actions that the agent can call. So you can have a prompt where you can say, okay, send me a mail about this, and it's going to use the action and the connector to do that. And finally, we have a pro code experience, even if I have to say that when we talk about the agents in Copilot, the pro code term is a bit misleading because in reality, you work on configuration files. So basically, you work with the JSON files that compose the agent. And typically that's tailored more for an audience of people who are familiar with Visual Studio Code and Visual Studio, so they have familiarity with these tools. Typically, the main advantages there. So in terms of capabilities, they are more or less the same. With the Pro Code approach, you have the concept instead of connectors, you have the concept of API plugins. So you can take any Open API specification and use it as an action, but the concept is similar. I would say the two key differences are the first one is you can get a better and easier lifecycle management because this is just a bunch of files, so you can store them on GitHub. You can have a GitHub action managing the deployment. And second, typically they get new feature faster because you don't have to build a UI, release it as part of a wave, so it's faster. The story changes a bit when we talk about instead what we call the custom engine agents. So agents that are not tied to the Copilot experience, but they can be independent. In this case, instead, the difference becomes more really on the low code versus pro code side, because on the low code side, you can use Copilot Studio, which is more friendly, but with limited options. With the pro code, sky's the limit. So you can use any model behind Azure AI Foundry. You can use any orchestration or semantic kernel, LangChain. You can use any moderation tools, Azure AI Content Safety. So you can really build a completely custom experience through an agent. The interesting part is that recently we have released a new feature that allows also this type of completely customized agents to be hosted in the Copilot chat experience. So you can use them along all the other Copilot agents, even if they are completely custom.
I think you may have answered some of the questions that I had, but what I want to know is, obviously customers come in with existing applications that they may have deployed in Azure, could be API endpoints or some other user experience. And so there's one way where they want to tie that into this new agentic world, right? So that's one way of integration. The other way of integration is the reverse, where the agents need to kind of talk back into existing flows that the customer already has, existing APIs. I think you mentioned there's a connector that can call any open API endpoint. So that may be one. I was wondering, how should customers think about these, these integration points between existing applications that are already deployed in Azure, obviously Azure authentication, and then, this new agentic world. Like what are some of the things they should be thinking about when they think about integration here?
So the easiest way is to have an API, because if you have an API, you can, and you have an open API description of this API, you can plug an agent to an API. And what's really important is through the specification, describing well in natural language what the API does, what the endpoint do, what are the input parameter, what's the meaning, because all this information will be used by the Copilot orchestrator to understand when and how to call the API. And the orchestrator is one interesting thing is that the orchestrator is really powerful, because, for example, yesterday I was testing very simple scenario, an agent that can call a set of weather APIs. And the weather APIs I was using, they accept an input. So you need to call an endpoint and you need to provide as input the latitude and the longitude of the location you want the forecast for. And since the description of the API contains all the information about, okay, this is the latitude, this is the longitude, this is the endpoint you need to use to get the forecast, the outcome is that basically in Copilot I was saying, okay, give me the forecast for Seattle, and behind the scenes the LLM was retrieving out of the box the coordinates for Seattle and passing them to the API. So without having me to break this down step by step to the agent. Everything was done automatically. So APIs are the way to go. For agent, we support OAuth authentication for APIs, so you can provide the OAuth configuration in the backend, and you will be able to use authenticated APIs. The only scenario for which today I don't have a good answer for you is the reverse one. So today, we don't really have a way to call an agent or Copilot from an external application. The closest you have is we have so in Copilot Studio, when you create a custom engine agent, you can publish this to multiple channels. So Teams is a channel, but it could be Slack, Telegram, so a web app, a mobile app. We have also a channel which is called Direct Line or Direct Chat. And this is basically a special channel that you can use to call a low-code agent via code, via an API, basically. So this would be a way to call such an agent from another application. But when it comes to the standard Copilot experience, as of today, we don't have something that you can say, okay, call a Copilot with an API and get me the results back. This is something missing.
Just kind of digging on a little bit more into that, because I was having the same kind of thoughts about the pro code side of it. I'm thinking of, AI Foundry. If I've built some .NET code or some Python code, maybe done some some prompt flow or something like that, or I've got pre-built indexes that I want to consume. I can see you've explained, with that weather API, how I can call an API and explain what it does. But I'm thinking the other way around as well in terms of not calling into Copilot, but having Copilot understand stuff that it can action, not just stuff that it can read back. So weather's not a great example because as far as I know, you can't tell the weather what to do. But if there was a way of setting the weather and saying, right, I want it now to be sunny for the next 3 days or something, is the way to do that also via APIs, or is it best to build? Is there a way to build a connector to package all my stuff up so that I've got a kind of a thing that can be deployed in a unit that says, this is the description of everything that it does. This is the APIs to call the endpoints, how you're going to integrate it, and when to call it as well.
No, the API is the way to go because an agent is able to call an API not just to retrieve information, but also to write information.
Okay.
So the output of an API could be a post and do something. So if you are in the pro code approach, then an API is totally fine. If you want to make something available also for a low code audience, you have the option to package an API basically into a connector. And basically a connector is let's say an easier front end around an API. So the maker doesn't see what's behind the API, but they see just that they can call an action and these are the parameters. But behind the scenes is an API. And if you publish an API as a connector, then this connector can be used by a maker who is using Copilot Studio to build the agent.
Thank you.
Matteo, can you tell us what has been like the most impressive or the most interesting Copilot you've seen or you've built?
I'm not sure if that's the most impressive, but for sure was one of the most useful. I supported a promptathon. So the promptathon are basically hackathons for Copilot. So when people are inspired to work on prompts that can satisfy some business scenarios. And I was working with this person from a college, and they basically needed to start matching students with requests of doing internship from companies. And they were struggling a bit with the initial part because they weren't able to. So students needed to fill a long form. The matching wasn't working really well. And their solution and what really worked well was instead creating an agent that was able to basically take that for them. So through a set of instructions and knowledge and action, the agent was able to ask the right questions, take the questions, whatever, in any way the student address them, and make them into a format that then was usable from the next steps of the agent to autonomously go and do the matching. So this was very impressive because it demonstrated how agent can solve some problems that today we struggle a bit to solve, because when you ask a question to a person, they might answer in 10 different ways to express the same concept. And an LLM is able to understand the nuances and categorize things in a very good way.
Yeah, I wanted to just kind of elaborate on one thing Matteo said earlier, and Russell was talking about the way you define these APIs, right? To explain what those open APIs do, because the LLM's obviously going to reason on that. It's going to use those descriptions to figure out, which API to call when. But another sort of extension to that is also the JSON payloads that you provide these APIs. You can also explain them very carefully. The individual fields in the JSON payloads, you should give verbose descriptions for each field, and it will figure out which fields to populate in the JSON now. So, they're talking about, the thing that you were just saying, Russell, about how it can kind of do actions. It can figure out which of those fields it needs to populate to complete a particular task. So I remember working with a customer on this and, explaining each and every field in good English detail. I said English, but there's going to be any other language. I don't know if English is the best, but in good amount of detail is key, I think, to making this work. I don't know, Matteo, what's your thought on that?
Yeah, that's exactly right. The lot of times when we see bad examples of agents or AI usage, it's because behind the scenes there isn't a good work on the prompt engineering side. One thing that we really push for customers is even before starting the whole agentic work, but really to be comfortable with prompt engineering, because it can really make the difference between a successful a project and instead a bad outcome. So as you said, for example, if you explain things carefully, you can even create basically programming workflows, because you can instruct the agent to return the result in a JSON using a specific format, and then this JSON can be automatically taken by the next step to do something else. So yes, absolutely. This is understanding all the nuances and the capabilities of an LLM is really the key to make it working like you're planning, and also to reduce a little bit the unpredictability. For example, returning JSON is a very good way to reduce this, because instead of returning a response in natural language that can have different formats, you return JSON and okay, JSON is fixed. It's a fixed structure.
So I know we're kind of wrapping up over here, but Matteo, I want to ask you, what do you see coming up in this new agentic world? What are customers asking for, and what is Microsoft doing to sort of make the product more productive?
So the main scenario that customers are looking for agents are around making more efficient business processes that today they are very complex, because they need a lot of manual input, a lot of manual analysis, a lot of manual work. For example, a common scenario that we've seen across different customers is okay, we are in a specific market. We have a lot of competitors, and every competitor is hosting the quarterly meeting to disclose their financial results, and I need an analysis and a breakthrough and a breakdown of every single competitor, where it is right now, so that I can plan my next step carefully. Today, this is something that, especially in some industries, is very, very complex, because you might have hundreds of competitors. But with agents instead, you can say, okay, go on internet, since these are all public information. Go on internet, pull the data that I need, prepare a research, and then I can focus on okay, now I need to understand what's the plan moving forward. So this is just an example of a scenario that comes into my mind. So all scenarios that today take a lot of time, and this time is not very well spent, because you are not spending the time to do the job that you like or that you are mostly prepared, but a job that it's administrative task, bureaucratic task, pulling, copying, and pasting information from a source. So things that if they can be automated, then instead I can focus on what I like doing more. And as a developer, I can relate to this, because in my work I build a lot of proof of concepts, and GitHub Copilot is my best friend, because a lot of times you have to generate synthetic data, fake data, samples. You have to build to write something, and you don't remember the exact line of code you need. But I mean, with the fun of a developer job is not going to Stack Overflow and search for information.
Right.
It's building
Right.
a POC that is very effective. So if I can
Yep.
mitigate that pain, I'm all in.
This may be a little bit meta, but I can use Copilot agent to actually help me build the agent code, right? In VS Code. So if I have the Pro code open in VS Code, I can use one agent to help me write the other then.
Yep.
Right? Mm-hmm. Cool, very cool. Thanks a lot, Matteo. You really got us thinking on this new agentic world. Thanks for breaking it down for us and explaining it to our listeners. I think this is very useful. It's such a complicated. It seems like a complicated thing, but I think the way you've explained it, Microsoft done a nice job to create this Copilot Studio product to make the entry point pretty easy, right, for customers. So you can start in easy and then get more in-depth and detailed as you feel more comfortable with the product. So I think that's really cool. Yeah. Well, thanks a lot again for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure.
Thanks, Matteo.